we are welcoming a man once again who needs little introduction. Sayyid Mehdi al-Mudarrisi, who is a scholar, a researcher, and an author, and comes from a family of well-known scholars, as you all will know. And he'll be continuing a discussion on reform in ourselves. And actually, I'll take a moment to just mention that Sayyid Mehdi, maybe he may not be aware. I WhatsApped him earlier, so I think he is now. But in the case of reform, he had a profound effect on myself in the younger years in London, where English majalis in particular were very few and far between. Sayyid Mehdi was leading the charge on the English majalis and had a very kind of defining role in my reform as a child, as well as many other friends that I have as well. So it's a great pleasure for me to invite him next to our podium. We'll be continuing our discussion. If you can welcome, please, Sayyid Mehdi. بذكر الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء وسيد المرسلين وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المكرمين الغرر الميامين سيما بقية الله في الأرضين وحجته على الخلائق أجمعين سيدنا وإمام زماننا وصاحب نعمتنا وولي أمرنا مهدي هذه الأمة وطاووس أهل الجنة الحجة بن الحسن العسكري فداه أرواح العالمين. قال الله العظيم في محكم كتابه الكريم يا قومنا أجيبوا داعي الله وآمنوا به يغفر لكم من ذنوبكم ويجركم من عذاب أليم. آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. My respected scholars, elders, teachers, and brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Imagine that you have been given a box. Let's say you inherited an old antique wooden box with a lock. And you receive this as part of your inheritance from your grandfather. Now, of course, because you received it from a loved one, someone that you cherish and respect, it gains special significance. You care about it because you received it from an individual who played a big role in your life. But because you don't have the key to unlock the antique box, you're not aware of its contents. In other words, its value in your perception is based exclusively on the fact that you inherited the box from a loved one. And you might be completely unaware of the fact that if you're able to open the box, you might find a gemstone that's worth $100 million, for instance. And so your interaction, your connection with the box is out of sync with its true value. This is exactly what defines our relationship with Imam Hussain. In other words, our appreciation of the Imam and his potential to inspire the entire world is out of sync with the way we interact with him. That's not to say that we don't appreciate Imam Hussain. When you travel across the globe, as some of the dear scholars have, as I have over the last 20 years, meeting different communities and interacting with the members of this fraternity that we call the Shia faith, you find that people are willing to lay their lives for Imam al-Hussein. During the period of commemorating the tragedy of Abu Abdullah alayhi salatu wassalam, the programs, the gatherings, the eulogies, they exude love and affection and affinity with the Imam. So there's no question that there is a very strong bond that connects us with the Imam. The problem is the fact that it's out of sync and disproportionate when it comes to the true value of the Imam. In other words, we've only tapped into 1 out of 1,000,000 in terms of what the Imam can actually do. The Holy Prophet is famous for saying, بِالْحُسَيْنِ تَسْعُدُونَ وَبِالْحُسَيْنِ تَشْقُونَ. In fact, it is exclusively through Hussein, who represents his father and his grandfather and embodies the values and principles and virtues and morals of this religion. It is exclusively through him that you can find happiness and you will achieve righteousness. And so when we begin to appreciate what Imam al-Hussein can do, that is when we would have tapped into the source of all that is good, of what can truly transform and transfigure the moral landscape. Not just the moral landscape, but humanity will be transformed if Imam al-Hussein was introduced as a guide, as an inspiration. If you look at events like Ziyarat al-Arba'in, for example, I said this in a procession a few years ago in Manhattan, in New York. I said, if you want a glimpse of what world peace looks like, look at this pilgrimage. It's the closest thing to world peace. It's the closest thing to unmatched harmony and synchronicity and beauty, where people are not judged based on any other factor than the fact that they are here to pledge their allegiance to divine values. Everybody's welcome. If you're a visitor of Imam al-Hussein, nobody asks you who you are, where you come from, your ethnicity, your tribal affiliations, nationality. All these things dissolve in the ocean of Hussein. And so, if you think about it, Ziyarat al-Arba'in is based on one hadith. Ziyarat al-Arba'in is a mere shadow of only a small fraction of what Ashura represents. The generosity that you see on an incredible, mind-bending scale, the almost 1 billion meals that are distributed, grata, is based on the fact that Imam al-Hussein displayed generosity on the day of Ashura that is then reverberated and reflected in Ziyarat al-Arba'in. So imagine if we're actually able to reflect the entire picture. This is in this dunya. If Imam al-Hussein and his legacy is translated, it truly transforms the world. As for the afterlife, that's an area that is beyond our comprehension. Listen to this hadith by Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, who says, Ya Zurara, ma fil ardi mu'minatun illa وقد وجب عليها أن تسعد فاطمة عليها السلام في زيارة الحسين. The Imam is speaking in the context of our obligation to visit Imam al-Hussein. In particular, he mentions women and how they should bring joy to Fatima al-Zahra by visiting her son. ثم قال يا زرارة إنه إذا كان يوم القيامة جلس الحسين عليه السلام في ظل العرش. Again, Imam al-Hussein's position is such that paradise, with all of its exquisite beauty, unimaginable joy and happiness, doesn't even stand a chance. He says that on the day of judgment, Imam al-Hussein will be seated under the shadow of God's throne. وَجَمَعَ اللَّهُ زُوَارَهُ وَشِيعَتَهُ. And around him, he will be surrounded by his followers and his visitors. لِيُبْصِرُوا مِنَ الْكَرَامَةِ وَالنُّصْرَةِ وَالْبَهْجَةِ وَالسُّرُورِ. So that they are given or exposed to joy and happiness and victory. إِلَىٰ أَمْرٍ لَا يَعْلَمُ صِفَتَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهُ. That only God can depict. In other words, it's not something that you can comprehend in any way. فَيَأْتِيهِمْ رُسُلُ أَزْوَاجِهِمْ مِنَ الْحُورِ الْعِينِ. And so the damsels in paradise, the spouses of the believers in paradise, will be waiting and waiting for the believers to come. Then they'll send messengers to go and say to these believers that we're still waiting for you. من الجنة فيقولون إنا رسل أزواجكم إليكم. We've been sent to ask you to come to paradise. Isn't this what you spent your whole life for? You faced all the suffering and pain and difficulty so that you could come to paradise, and now you're just waiting by the entrance. And so, or rather with Imam al-Hussein, إنا رسل أزواجكم إليكم يقولن إنا قد اشتقناكم وأبطأتم عنا. We're eagerly waiting for you. You've taken too long. فيحملهم ما هم فيه من السرور والكرامة على أن يقولوا لرسلهم. The people surrounding Imam al-Hussein alayhi salatu wassalam are so overwhelmed with joy that they'll tell the messengers, سوف نجيئكم إن شاء الله. Go back. We'll join you later on. Because they're looking at the beauty of the face of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, which distracts them from all of the joys and pleasures and bliss of paradise. So Imam al-Hussein, whether it be this world or the next, he is our moral compass. He is what can truly give meaning and life and color to an otherwise dark and miserable world. بِالْحُسَيْنِ تَسْعُدُونَ. The issue is that, going back to the example that I mentioned earlier, we don't appreciate the value of Imam al-Hussein. We do to a very, very small extent, but we don't see the true potential of the Imam. Had Imam al-Hussein belonged to any other denomination, then you would see different results. You would see the propagation done, especially external propagation, to introduce the world to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam on a completely different scale. And, I remember once going to a theatrical production. It's a play about Jesus Christ. And it was an incredible experience because it was a random Tuesday morning, and it was an Amish country somewhere in Pennsylvania, and we actually had to go through these Amish villages, and very difficult to get to, but we ended up getting there, and we went in, and the theater had 2,000 seats. Every single one of them was occupied, and it was like a $120 ticket that you had to pay. So we went in and we watched the theatrical production. I cried. Everybody cried. And I cried despite the fact that I knew that half the things that were being shown to us were not true. But it was a very powerful production. It was incredibly well orchestrated, well done, very expensive as well. My point is that the external propagation and the attention and priority that is given to promoting religious symbols and personalities of other religions is not something you can compare to what we do when it comes to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. The disparity is cause for concern. Again, it's a lack of appreciation. Because the minute you introduce people to Imam Hussein, you know for a fact that they're going to be gravitating towards him. لو عرف الناس محاسن كلامنا لاتبعونا, as Imam Rida alayhi salam says. If only they're exposed to the beauty that is the words, teachings, and moral examples of the Ahlul Bayt, they'll gravitate towards them. They will fall head over heels in love with them. And so you don't need big budgets. You don't need to manipulate the masses. You don't need marketing techniques. You don't need behavioral sciences. All you need to do is show them to others and say, this is who Imam al-Hussein was. I once met a university professor at New York University who had converted to Tashayyu' because he heard the story of Hur. Not even Imam al-Hussein himself. The story of Hur represented the turning point for this professor of Islamic studies at New York University. So again, this gives you a glimpse. I personally have a keen interest in conversions that are caused at least partially by exposure to the legend of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. I've followed this for many years, recently wrote a book about it. And it's amazing to see how the smallest, most trivial detail in the story of Imam al-Hussein can completely transform an individual. And for them to shed all this baggage, all this affiliation that they have to their culture, to their religion, to their faith, and embrace Abu Abdullah al-Hussein is mind-blowing. And again, an indicative of the fact that Imam al-Hussein's potential has yet to be tapped into. Imagine you have like an oil reserve of 1 billion barrels, and yet all you take out is a couple of barrels every year during a specific season, because we can't be bothered to go and extract the rest of the mineral. I'll mention a hadith which is again incredible, and it describes and explains this phenomenon of why people gravitate to the Imam. في كتاب مناقب آل أبي طالب لابن شهر آشور عن معاوية بن عمار عن الصادق عليه السلام قال رسول الله, listen carefully to this, إن حب علي قذف في قلوب المؤمنين. The love of Ali ibn Abi Talib is exclusive for the believers as opposed to the hypocrites. في قلوب المؤمنين فلا يحبه إلا مؤمن ولا يبغضه إلا منافق. Only a believer will love Ali ibn Abi Talib, and only a hypocrite will despise and abhor and hate Amir al-Mu'mineen. وإن حب الحسن والحسين قذف في قلوب المؤمنين والمنافقين والكافرين. As for the love of Hassan and Hussein, you know for a fact that there's something different, something essentially different about Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. People flock to him, they gravitate to him. This explains why so many Christians were able to forge a bond with Imam al-Hussein on his way to Karbala, in Karbala, after Karbala, the monk, the ambassador of the Roman emperor, and all of these stories that you hear begin to make sense, that there is a gravitational pull that Imam al-Hussein has, as well as Imam al-Hassan, that is unexplainable. قذف في قلوب المؤمنين والمنافقين والكافرين فلا ترى لهم ذاما. You never find anyone who criticizes or who hates Imam al-Hussein wal-Imam al-Hassan alayhim as-salam. ودعا النبي الحسن والحسين قرب موته فقبلهما وشمهما وجعل يرشفهما وعيناه تهملان. وفي حديث, and there's another hadith by Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi السلام, إن الحسن والحسين قد اشتركا في حبهما البر والفاجر. Again, whether you're righteous or evil, God forbid, they both find this affinity that's intrinsic to them towards Imam al-Hussein and Imam al-Hassan. And so what I'd like to propose, and I would like to conclude on this note, is that we need to look at new means of introducing people to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. We talk about thinking outside the box. I'd like to talk about thinking outside the mosque. Having these sacred institutions that have given us all the tools, all the inspiration to flourish and to grow and to be where we are today. 30 years ago, none of these programs that you see right now were even things that you could imagine, right? 20 years ago, once again, you had small institutions, small buildings here and there holding majalis, but the momentum is absolutely incredible. And again, this shows the potential. The question is, where are we going to be in 20 years' time, in 30 years' time? Will we have more institutions? Inshallah, we will. Will we commemorate the tragedy of Imam Hussain alayhi salam with greater vigor and enthusiasm? Inshallah, we will. But will we be able to tap into the potential of the Imam to a greater extent where non-Muslims and people of different denominations will also recognize Imam al-Hussein? I think this needs us to plan ahead and to figure out new means of doing this. For instance, I feel it's incredibly sad and demoralizing that when we want to introduce someone who's not Muslim to Imam al-Hussein, we still have to quote Gandhi. Whether or not that quote was authentic to begin with is another discussion. I think that we need to find new people who are influential, who are notable in this day and age. They're relatable to the new generation, who are introduced to Imam al-Hussein so that we could get them to speak about him and to extract quotes from them, right? And this isn't too difficult. In fact, it's a lot easier today than it was in the past. You know, the whole 6 degrees of separation theory. The fact that you can reach anybody, anywhere in the world through 6 or less connections. It's possible. This has actually been tested, right? My point is that with social media, with globalization, with the world becoming such a small place and a small village, it's possible for us to reach anybody. Now, I'm not saying that we should go and try and convert the Pope, but in your own locality, in your own city, in your own countries, you can begin to identify the individuals that you can perhaps address, you can write to, you can go meet and say, we have somebody, you know, this is his story, this is his legend, these are his teachings, share a few books with them, and they will gravitate to the Imam. They will be inspired by the Imam, even if they choose to maintain their existing religious affiliation, even if they don't convert to Islam. It doesn't matter, as long as you connect them to Imam al-Hussein and make sure that they're inspired by him. And then, of course, when they speak, use those quotes and try and speak about Imam al-Hussein using those influential individuals. أشهد أنك قتلت ولم تمت. Imam al-Hussein is the spring of life. بل برجاء حياتك حيت قلوب شيعتك. I bear witness that you were killed, but you never died. In fact, it was through the inspiration that we get from you that your followers were able to survive. وبضياء نورك اهتدى الطالبون إليك. It was your light that led people toward you. Again, you don't need to shed light on Imam al-Hussein. His light exudes inspiration. وأشهد أنك نور الله الذي لم يطفأ ولا يطفأ أبدا. You're God's light, He will never be extinguished. وأنك وجه الله الذي لم يهلك ولا يهلك أبدا. وأشهد أن هذه التربة تربتك. I bear witness, you say in the ziyarah, that this is your grave. وهذا الحرم حرمك وهذا المصرع مصرع بدنك. This is the place where your body was killed and you were interred. لا ذليل والله معزك ولا مغلوب والله ناصرك. No one is humiliated if they receive support from you. And so let us try and appreciate the value of Imam al-Hussein, number one. And number two, invent new, innovative means of introducing him to the world, inshallah. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa alihi at-tahirin. Allah.
Ahsantum, many thanks.